Take any standard classroom of 25 students, and you are immediately confronted by extreme cognitive, linguistic, and cultural variability. Every student processes information, maintains attention, and expresses knowledge through a highly individualized neurological profile. This creates an immediate logistical tension. Teachers are tasked with guiding this profound human variability toward mastery of rigid curriculum standards, all while bound by the constraints of a 45-minute block and finite planning time. Attempting to resolve this tension usually surfaces two immediate misconceptions. The first is that accommodating different learning needs requires lowering academic standards or watering down the material until it is universally accessible. The second is the assumption that a teacher must write 25 entirely separate, individualized lesson plans every night to reach every student in the room. Both are false. Managing extreme neurovariability upscale cannot be achieved through ad hoc, frantic individualization or lowered expectations. It requires the implementation of permanent, proactive architectural frameworks. This diagram illustrates the KUD framework, representing what a student must know, understand, and do. It serves as the structural anchor for inclusive instructional design. You cannot differentiate a fuzzy objective. By forcing educators to articulate exactly which facts must be known, which concepts must be understood, and which skills must be executed, the KUD matrix isolates the precise learning target. In rigorous programs like the International Baccalaureate, these expectations remain high for all students. The target itself is non-negotiable. What becomes flexible is the pathway a student takes to there. The methods, materials, and processes are highly varied, but they all converge on the exact same metric of mastery. True, rigorous differentiation only functions when the destination remains invariable, even as the routes to reach it multiply. The first layer of this classroom architecture is Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. Pioneered by CAST, UDL establishes a proactive, accessible baseline environment before any actual teaching begins. This vector model maps how UDL is derived from cognitive neuroscience, dividing the brain's activity into three primary networks. The recognition network in the back identifies information, which UDL addresses through multiple means of representation, dictating the what of learning. The strategic network in the frontal lobes organizes tasks. UDL addresses this through multiple means of action and expression, providing the how of learning. Finally, the affective network governs motivation. UDL engages this through multiple means of engagement, securing the why. In a primary school literacy lesson, a teacher applies this baseline by offering a printed book, an audiobook, and interactive digital text at the exact same time. For a student with dyslexia, the printed text presents a massive decoding barrier. By having audio available by default, that barrier is bypassed. The student absorbs the narrative and tackles the actual learning objective, comprehension, without fighting the medium. By embedding these multiple pathways directly into the environment, UDL eliminates systemic barriers up front, drastically reducing the need to retroactively grant specific accommodations to individual students later. While UDL sets the broad environment of the classroom, differentiated instruction, or DI, operates as the responsive pedagogical layer sitting directly on top of it. This blueprint illustrates Carol Ann Tomlinson's framework for DI, mapping the levers a teacher can pull. Vertical columns represent student variables, academic readiness, personal interests, and learning profile. Horizontal rows represent the teacher's tools, modifying content, process, or product to prove mastery. This structured approach fulfills the specific requirements of the International Baccalaureate's Domain L. This standard focuses on the differentiation of assessment, explicitly asking how practices support every individual student. To make these adjustments accurately, educators rely strictly on continuous formative assessment data. You cannot route a student effectively if you do not know exactly where their skills currently sit. The two frameworks work in tandem. UDL designs the inclusive classroom architecture, and DI is how the teacher actively navigates specific individuals through that architecture. In this model, assessment ceases to be a static endpoint judgment. It becomes a dynamic, ongoing diagnostic tool used to continuously route students to the right instructional lever. Consider a 6th grade math class moving into a unit on fractions. This schematic reveals the lesson's underlying architecture. Using data from a pre-assessment quiz, the teacher groups students by their current readiness levels. The class uses 3 workstations. One features complex independent fraction problems, while another provides dense, direct scaffolding for the exact same concepts. Simultaneously, an educational tech platform provides dynamic, individualized feedback loops to students as they practice. Every group is working through different tiers of complexity, yet every group is tackling the exact same invariable KUD objective regarding fraction mechanics. Tomlinson defines this as teaching up. You start with high-end curriculum and expectations for everyone, and you build the necessary scaffolding upward to lift the students who need it. Differentiating the process maintains strict academic rigor. The teacher adjusts the structural support placed beneath the student, never the outcome expected from them. Moving into a high school literature class, the focus shifts to differentiating the product. This lesson utilizes the RAFTS framework, assigning a specific role, audience, format, topic, and strong verb. Through a choice board, the teacher offers multiple formats. A student can write an analytical essay, record an audio podcast, or outline a mock trial argument. Each option requires the student to prove their grasp of rhetorical analysis, but the architecture allows them to select the medium that best aligns with their expressive strengths. The assessment rubric evaluating their rhetorical understanding remains identical across all 3 formats. Allowing students to leverage their personal interests to select their output format drives significantly higher engagement, especially when deconstructing complex texts. Product differentiation validates varied expressions of intelligence while keeping absolute academic fidelity to the required core state standard. These architectural frameworks have a systemic impact on how schools handle neurodivergent students. Historically, individualized education programs have relied heavily on a deficit model. They identify what the student lacks and attempt to write policies to fix it. Look closely at traditional benchmarks. You will see language penalizing students for failing to mimic neurotypical behaviors, labeling coping mechanisms as maladaptive or inappropriate. Embedding structural choices natively through UDL and DI shifts the focus from managing student deficits to leveraging their existing assets. The student is no longer framed as a problem to be retroactively solved. Instead, the environment absorbs their cognitive variability as a native classroom feature. True inclusive design is never about fixing the student. It is entirely about dismantling the environmental constraints that hinder them. Implementing universal design and differentiated instruction does not demand 25 separate lesson plans, nor does it generate an endless retroactive workload for educators. Like a physical bridge, the effort is in proactive front-loading. The design work happens before anyone steps into the room, creating a permanent, robust architecture. The protocol is sequential. Establish rigid KUD learning targets, build proactive UDL environments to remove barriers, and apply responsive DI strategies to guide the learner. This 2-step architecture resolves the tension between standardized academic rigor and profound human diversity, without compromising either. By committing to this structural approach, educational institutions move past simply discussing inclusivity. They actively operationalize true equity.